I've always known how to make myself disappear. Not in the magic trick kind of way. More like learning how to shrink your voice, your steps, even your breathing, until people forget you're in the room. It started early, back in South Bronx, where kids learned to listen before they learned to speak, where making eye contact was a risk, and silence was its own kind of survival. I didn't grow up dreaming big. I grew up dodging problems, holding my breath through sirens, and memorizing the sound of footsteps that didn't belong to anyone you wanted at your door. By 19, I was living in a peeling third-floor apartment with a broken heater and a fridge that groaned louder than the neighbors. My mom had passed the year before, and my little sister lived with an aunt in Georgia. She was the bright one, the good one. I sent her money every Friday through a Western Union counter that smelled like old coffee and crushed hope. To earn it, I cleaned, not houses, not hotels. I cleaned corporate America, glass towers and marble floors, places where the light fixtures cost more than anything I owned, where no one looked twice at the cleaning girl with the ID badge and the quiet shoes. Grant and Pembroke LLP was the biggest firm on the block. 52 floors of suits, deals, power lunches, and closing rooms that never slept. I worked the graveyard shift, arrived after 9 p.m., when most of the action was over, and the ghosts of ambition lingered in paper cups and fingerprints on glass doors. The security guard knew my name, but barely used it. The elevators made a low hum like they resented going that high. My floor was always the top 3 where the senior partners had their empires. I never touched anything I wasn't paid to touch. That was rule number 1. Wipe the surface, empty the trash, move on. But when you work the same space 5 nights a week, you start to notice patterns. Coffee rings that always appear in the same spot. A chair that's never quite pushed in. The way one guy always left gum wrappers in his drawer like he was hiding some kind of sugar addiction. And then there was Mason Whitaker. The name was on the wall in gold. Founding partner. Everyone in the building lowered their voices when they said it, like speaking too loud might summon him. I had only seen him from afar, mostly through glass, or walking toward the elevators with a phone glued to his ear, and eyes that never blinked long enough to notice anyone beneath him. Tall, clean-cut, always in a black suit, the kind that looked sharp even at midnight. He never spoke to me. Not once. Not a nod, not a hello, not a single flicker of acknowledgement. And honestly, that was fine. People like Mason didn't need to see people like me, and I didn't need to be seen. That was the unspoken agreement. He stayed in his world, I stayed in mine. But still, I watched. Not out of curiosity. Out of habit. You pay attention when your survival depends on reading people fast. He was efficient, methodical. His office was always spotless, even before I cleaned. He didn't leave papers scattered or half-drunk water bottles on his desk. He was the kind of man who wrote in black ink only and probably had backups of every file. But he also had something else. Something I noticed the first week I cleaned his office. A small silver flash drive. Sleek, smooth edges. It sat just beside a framed photo, black and white, slightly faded. A woman with strong eyes and a straight-lipped smile. Maybe his mother. Maybe someone else who didn't smile often. The photo never moved. Neither did the drive. And that's what made it easy to spot later, when something wasn't right. It was a Tuesday. One of those spring nights where the city feels like it can't decide between warmth and cold. I remember because the air smelled like rain but never delivered. I showed up late that night, just 15 minutes, but enough to throw off my rhythm. The elevator stalled on the 39th floor before coughing its way up to 51. When I stepped out, I felt it immediately. Something was off. The lights were on in Mason Whitaker's office, but he wasn't there. That wasn't unusual. He often stepped out for calls or ducked into one of the side conference rooms. What was unusual was the state of his desk. It wasn't messy, but it wasn't him. The arrangement was wrong. The pen, normally parallel to the legal pad, was angled. The coaster for his espresso cup had a faint ring, like someone had rushed. And the silver USB his USB was sitting in the same spot, but it wasn't the same one. It was shinier, polished, not matte. I knew because I'd wiped the real one more times than I could count. I could practically describe it by touch. Brushed metal, slight dent on the edge. This one had no dent, no texture. Just smooth and bright like it had been swapped out of the packaging that afternoon. I stared at it longer than I should have. If it was anyone else's office, I would have shrugged it off. But Mason? No. He was obsessive about routine. That drive never moved more than an inch from the base of the picture frame. He looked like the kind of man who ironed his socks. Next to the USB sat a folder I hadn't seen before. Bold letters stamped on the front. Confidential. Asset Transfer Agreement. Rydell Holdings. I wasn't nosy by nature. But survival had taught me to pay attention to things people leave unattended. The folder was unlatched. I could see just enough to catch phrases that made my stomach clench. Exclusive rights relinquished. Ownership consolidation. Binding, non-revocable. I didn't understand all of it, but I didn't need to. I knew what it looked like. A transfer of control, something big, something final, and someone had swapped the USB right before it was supposed to happen. I looked again at the drive, then at the signature already inked on the bottom page. Mason's name, in sharp, clean lettering. His writing was as precise as his posture, but the date field was still blank. He hadn't signed it yet. Not completely. I didn't move, just stood there, heart thudding in my ears, unsure what I was even doing. No one would believe me if I said something. What was I going to do? March into the boardroom and yell, "Hey, that flash drive is shiny and I don't like it." They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd call security. Fire me. Make sure I never worked another cleaning job in Manhattan. But I'd seen too much in my life to ignore a gut feeling. And this? This felt like the beginning of a takedown. The kind that didn't need guns or threats, just paper, signatures, and the wrong drive in the right place. Footsteps echoed behind me. Mason walked in, voice low, mid-call. "Yes, I'll review it now. No, I'm not hesitating. I'm just being thorough." He glanced up and froze when he saw me still standing there. I didn't wait for him to speak. "That's not your flash drive," I said. His brow lifted. "Excuse me?" "You use a brushed silver drive. That one's new. It's glossy. There's no dent near the base." He looked at the desk, then at me. "How would you even know that?" I didn't blink. "I clean this office 5 nights a week. I don't touch your stuff, but I notice things." Silence stretched between us. Not the awkward kind, more like something shifting underneath us that neither of us could name yet. He reached for the drive, slowly, like it might burn. "Why does this matter?" he asked, voice cautious. "Because whatever's in that folder, it's not what it's pretending to be, and someone doesn't want you to notice." He didn't answer, just stood there, drive in one hand, eyes flickering with something I hadn't seen before. uncertainty. And in that moment, I realized something that scared me more than speaking up ever could. I couldn't stay silent anymore. You ever step into a room where you don't belong and feel the temperature drop just because you opened the door? That was me, standing in a boardroom worth more than my apartment building, with a mop bucket I'd left somewhere behind me and a voice in my throat that didn't know how to sound important. They were all seated 8 men, 2 women, polished, powerful, postured. Mason sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled halfway up, gold pen between his fingers, signature halfway written on the last page of a thick contract. His eyes were locked on the paper. No one noticed me walk in. No one ever did. I could have walked back out, and no one would have remembered I'd been there at all. I stood still for half a second too long enough to see Mason lower the pen, almost touch ink to paper, and I heard myself whisper, "Don't." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft, like something between a warning and a prayer. His hand froze. The pen hovered just above the line. He looked up. That was the first time our eyes met. Really met. I don't know what I expected. Maybe confusion, maybe annoyance. But what I saw was something closer to alarm. Like he knew something was wrong and didn't yet know what it was. Then came the second wave. Everyone else at the table turned. Their eyes found me like a virus in a sterile room. Their expressions ranged from irritation to disbelief. One of them, a man in a navy suit and a buzz cut, spoke first. "Excuse me, who is this?" No one answered. Not even Mason. He was still looking at me. Really looking. Like he was trying to read a language he didn't realize he'd need to know today. I felt my hands tremble, but I didn't drop my gaze. "That drive isn't yours," I said quietly. "It's not the one you always use." He blinked. "What did you say?" I stepped a little closer to the table. "The USB. Yours is brushed silver. This one's glossy, no dent near the edge." The room went dead silent. Another woman older, with silver blonde hair and a tight black dress, leaned forward slightly. "Who the hell is this girl?" Mason still hadn't spoken. He reached toward the drive without taking his eyes off me, picked it up, turned it between his fingers. Something in his face changed. Recognition. Not of me. Of the truth. He turned to the man beside him. "Where did this come from?" The man, tall, tanned, slicked back hair, paused just a second too long before saying, "Your assistant left it on your desk. She said you'd requested it last night." "I didn't," Mason said flatly. A few heads turned. The air in the room had shifted, just a crack in the marble, but enough to feel the weight starting to shift. Then he looked at me again. "What's your name?" I swallowed. "Angela." "What do you do here?" "I clean your office. 5 nights a week." No one spoke for a long moment. Then, quietly, Mason said, "Clear the room." There were protests, confusion, raised eyebrows. But he didn't raise his voice. He just said it again, firmer. "Clear the room." And they did. One by one, chairs scraped back, and expensive shoes clicked across hardwood until the door closed behind the last of them. And then it was just me, and him, and a drive that didn't belong. He didn't say anything for the first few seconds after the door closed. just stood there, still holding the flash drive like it might explain itself if he gave it enough silence. I stayed near the wall. Part of me wanted to leave, to vanish like I always did. But the other part, the one that whispered "don't" in the middle of that boardroom, was wide awake. Mason finally looked up. "Sit," he said. Not cold, not warm, just unreadable. I didn't. "I'll stand." His eyes narrowed slightly, not in offense, more like interest. He nodded once, set the drive on the table between us. "You said this isn't mine. I've seen the real one, 5 nights a week. It sits next to the silver frame on your desk." He paused. "You notice that?" "I notice everything I'm not supposed to touch." He studied me then. Not in a creepy way, not like some men do when they realize you're not invisible. This was different, calculated, careful. "The real one has a matte finish," I continued. "Slightly dull. There's a small dent near the base, like it was dropped once, right-hand side." He looked down at the drive on the table. It was smooth, flawless, too perfect. He turned toward the wall behind him, where the silver-framed photo sat exactly where I said it would be. I couldn't see the expression on his face, but his shoulders tensed the way people do when something starts to make sense in the worst possible way. When he turned back around, the quiet between us had shifted. "Do you know what was on this?" "No," I said quickly, "but I know it matters." "Why didn't you say something earlier?" "I just did." He didn't like that answer. I saw it flicker in his jaw, the way it tightened. "You realize this could have cost me everything? You realize it still might?" That one landed harder than I meant it to. He looked at me again, really looked this time. Like he was trying to decide if I was a threat, a fluke, or something else entirely. Then he picked up the drive and held it between 2 fingers. "Someone swapped it." "Yes. Someone with access to this floor, my office, and knowledge of the deal." I stayed quiet. His eyes dropped to the contract again. "This was handed to me by Elias. He said it was prepped, final, all clean." That name, Elias, stuck in the air between us like a knife half pulled from the wood. I didn't know who he was yet, but from the way Mason said it, I guessed he was someone who once mattered. "Could have been a mistake," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Then why change the drive?" He didn't answer. I took a step closer. Just one. "I'm not saying I know what's going on, but you're about to give away something huge, and someone just handed you the wrong key without blinking." Another silence, but this one felt heavier. "You know," he said slowly, "I built this company with Elias. We were barely out of college. No lawyers, no investors, just a shared credit card and bad coffee." "People change," I said, "or they never really were who we thought." His hand clenched slightly around the drive. "Why would he risk this? The firm's success is his success." I shrugged. "Maybe he's decided it's not enough, or maybe you were never supposed to notice." He looked up at me, and this time the question wasn't hidden. "Are you playing me?" "No." Clever timing. Suspiciously clever. "I don't have the luxury of clever. I mop your floors." Another beat. Then he said, low and even, "Are you lying to me?" I didn't blink. "If you knew how to look," I said, "you wouldn't have to ask." That stopped him. For a breath. Maybe 2. He leaned back, as if the chair behind him wasn't enough to hold the weight suddenly pressing down. His eyes flicked again to the photo frame on his desk, then to the flash drive. then to me. And I knew, in that moment, that something had shifted inside him. Not trust. Not yet. But the first crack in certainty. Because once someone like Mason starts asking the right questions, he doesn't stop until the truth is staring him in the face. And sometimes that truth comes from the quietest place in the room. The first time I heard the name Elias Granger, it sounded like a line out of a Harvard brochure. Perfectly smooth, thoroughly polished. Mason had said it almost without meaning to, like you say the name of a scar long faded, but still sore when pressed. Elias was his business partner, his best friend, the kind of ride-or-die history people love to brag about at charity galas. Started the firm together, slept on the floor of a one-room office, built something from nothing. I'd never met him, but I'd seen his name on framed articles in the hallway, on the top of donation checks for causes I'd never heard of. Always second after Mason's, but always there. And now, Mason looked at that name like it had been forged in another life. After the meeting, he asked me to stay. No one else was around. Not HR, not legal, just the janitor girl and the man trying to figure out if the person he built his kingdom with was pulling bricks out from underneath him. "You said people leave patterns," he told me that night. "They do," I replied. He poured himself a drink, something expensive and dark. Offered me one. I shook my head. I wasn't there to feel comfortable. He sat across from me, tie loosened but still hanging like a noose. "Tell me what you've noticed." It felt strange, saying these things out loud, like I was admitting I'd been watching when I wasn't supposed to. But I'd learned long ago that safety lives in details, and I paid attention to everything. 3 months ago, Elias started coming in after hours, I said. Always on Thursdays. Never the same time. Always alone. Mason frowned. "He doesn't work nights. He hates staying late." I nodded. "But he brought a second phone. He used the back elevator. And he kept taking meetings in your office when you weren't around." That caught him. "In my office?" I didn't flinch. "He'd leave crumbs, not literal ones signs, coaster rings on the left side of the desk. You're right-handed. He's not." Mason looked down at his own hand like he needed to confirm. I continued. "The keyboard on your desk. It's always perfectly centered, but some nights it'd be shifted left. His posture's different. I've seen the way he sits in the cafeteria. One shoulder forward." He ran a hand down his face. Not in frustration, in something closer to recognition. Like I was confirming things his gut had told him but his heart had refused to hear. "And 2 weeks ago," I added, "he left a file open on your desktop. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did." "What was it?" "A spreadsheet. Financial projections. But the company name wasn't ours. It said Pinnacle Meridian Holdings." Mason went still. "I know that name," he muttered. "They were our biggest acquisition target last year. We dropped the deal. Confidential leaks ruined it." "You think Elias leaked it?" He didn't answer, just stood and walked over to his desk, pulled open a drawer and yanked out a file, flipped through papers like his hands were searching faster than his brain could catch up. "He told me it was sabotage," he said slowly. "That someone inside the target company leaked our numbers to a competitor. We pulled out, took the hit. And you believed him." His eyes lifted. They weren't angry. They were tired. I didn't want not to. I didn't know what to say to that. Some truths feel heavier when they're spoken aloud, like they've been hiding in the walls, just waiting for someone to turn on the light. Mason sat back down. "You saw all of this," he said. "You remembered it, the angle of a keyboard, the handprint on a coaster." I nodded. "You never said a word." "I wasn't supposed to be listening," I said. "And people don't like being told they're being watched, especially people in power." There was a long silence. Then he said, almost to himself, "Maybe I should have been watching back." Because sometimes betrayal isn't loud. It whispers. It shifts a coaster by an inch, and it walks into your office like it belongs there. By Friday, Mason had stopped pretending he wasn't worried. He called me back after midnight, said he couldn't sleep, asked if I still had time to help him see what's already there. That was how he put it. Like the truth was just sitting in a corner, waiting for someone with clear eyes. The building was empty. The city was humming low outside. In his office, all the light came from the monitors. Mason sat down and pulled up internal files access logs, email records, financial projections. Password protected, but not for someone who had full control. He didn't know what he was looking for exactly, but I did. "You ever check admin logins at odd hours?" I asked. He turned, almost startled. "Like what?" "Between 2 and 4 a.m. The system says those hours don't exist, but someone's been bypassing it." He frowned. "That's impossible. Our IT locks after midnight unless scheduled." "That's what you think," I said. "But I found mirrored activity ghost logins. Someone's been bouncing access through a decoy profile." His eyes narrowed. "How do you even know that?" I shrugged. "One of the IT guys used to talk too much on the phone when I cleaned. Thought no one was listening." I showed him. The pattern was clear. Every Thursday, just past 2 a.m., someone logged in under a dormant sub-admin alias E. Gray. Elias Granger. Mason's hands stiffened on the desk. "He accessed quarterly forecast reports," I added. "Revenue movement projections, upcoming contracts, and flagged them as exported, not reviewed. That means they weren't read. They were taken." "Taken for what?" "To sell," I said simply. "Or sabotage. Maybe both." He sat back, staring at the screen, not blinking. For a moment, the weight of it all cracked his voice. "Sandra, our CFO, told me last quarter's report came in delayed. I thought it was a system bug." It wasn't. His jaw tensed. He tapped the desk once, then stood abruptly and walked toward the window. I followed his eyes. Downtown was lit up in its usual arrogance. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. I looked at his reflection, not at him. "You think I'm doing this for a favor?" "I think it's personal. Has to be. You risked your job, maybe more." I took a long breath. "I'm doing this," I said carefully, "because I hate watching the truth get killed by silence." He turned, met my eyes. "I've cleaned offices where guys like Elias smile at you in the elevator but spend their nights destroying people who don't know they're being hunted. I've seen deals printed, shredded, rewritten to favor names no one ever questions." "Still," he said, softer now, "that's not your problem." "No," I replied, "but it used to be my mother's." I didn't mean to say that out loud. His gaze shifted sharp, but not invasive, just curious enough to make me uncomfortable. "She trusted someone once," I added. "He took everything, her savings, her credit, left us with 2 trash bags of clothes and 6 overdue bills." I could feel my hands shaking slightly, even if I tried to hide it. She didn't say a word. She thought if she kept quiet, the world would forget faster. It didn't. Mason didn't respond right away. He just nodded, once, like he finally understood something he'd missed. And in that stillness, something changed between us. Not warmth, not yet, but recognition. Like two people who realized they weren't looking across a divide, they were standing on the same side of the cliff. He pulled the chair out beside him and gestured. "Sit. We've got work to do." And for the first time since I walked into that building, I sat like I belonged there. Because sometimes what you uncover isn't just betrayal. It's what happens when someone forgets the quiet ones are always watching. And sometimes we remember everything. There's a silence that comes after certain truths, the kind that doesn't ask for comfort. It just settles in, like dust you can't sweep away. That's the silence I grew up with. I was 12 when my mother remarried. He was charming at first, the kind of man who said grace at dinner and called me sweetheart, like it cost him nothing. I wanted to believe he meant well. Wanted to believe she had finally chosen someone who wouldn't turn our world into ash. But predators don't come wearing warning signs. They come as solutions, as saviors, as men who smile while calculating what they can take from you. He didn't hit me. He didn't scream. He just waited. And when my mom fell behind on her third job and the rent doubled overnight, he told her he had a way out. I remember the night he said it. He stood in the kitchen, smoking out the window like he always did when something was about to get ugly. "She's young," he told someone on the phone. "Clean, not broken like some of the others." I didn't even know what he meant at first. I just stood outside the doorway, barefoot, holding a chipped glass of water I never drank. I found out the next night. There was a man I'd never seen waiting in a car across the street. My stepfather told me to wear the nice dress, the one my real dad bought me before he disappeared. He told me I'd be gone a few hours, said it like it was a sleepover. I ran. Out the back door. Across 2 blocks. Into a church I'd never stepped foot in. Slept in the storage room behind the pews for 3 days until a woman found me. She didn't ask too many questions, and I didn't give many answers. That was how I learned silence worked both ways. Sometimes it protected you. Sometimes it just kept the shame from multiplying. I bounced around after that. Shelters, couch hopping, working under the table jobs for cash. I got my GED in a community center while scrubbing bathrooms between shifts. That was the start of me not being a person with a plan. Just a girl who learned how to see danger before it saw her first. And from that moment on, I swore off 2 things: control and price tags. No one would ever own me again. No one would ever get to say what I was worth. That's why I hate contracts. Why the sight of that transfer agreement on Mason's desk made something in me twist. Because I know what it looks like when someone signs away what they don't realize is theirs. I know what it feels like to be transferred, to be considered an asset, not a human being. Mason didn't know any of this. Not yet. But I think, somewhere in the way I looked at that USB, maybe he started to sense it. We didn't come from the same world. He grew up learning how to win. I grew up learning how not to lose. But sometimes those paths cross, especially when someone tries to turn your life into a line item. So when he asked me again, softly, almost hesitantly, "Why this? Why now?" I didn't tell him the whole story. I just said, "Because I've never been the one choosing how my story ends. And this time, I want to be. Because there's a difference between surviving something and deciding you won't let it happen to someone else." After I told him a piece of my story, Mason didn't speak for a while. He just sat there, eyes unfocused, the kind of silence that doesn't look away from you, but also doesn't quite stay present. Like his body was in the room, but his mind had gone somewhere years behind us. Eventually, he stood, walked to the cabinet behind his desk, poured another drink, just a splash this time, barely enough to change the color of the glass. He didn't offer me one. He knew better now. He looked at the framed photo sitting on the credenza, beside the awards and useless trophies that made this office feel like a shrine to ambition. Then he said, almost without breath, "My mother used to tell me that I was her investment." I didn't move. She didn't say it cruelly, not at first. She said it like a compliment, like I was her future return, a portfolio of potential. He took a sip. She was a school teacher in Detroit, tough, sharp, the kind of woman who corrected strangers' grammar mid-conversation. My father left when I was 7. I don't even remember his face. She raised me alone, worked nights, tutored on weekends, paid for a private prep school by doing other kids' homework under fake names. He gave a short laugh, dry, bitter. I got into Columbia on a scholarship. First day she gave me a card that said, "Don't come home empty-handed." I still have it somewhere. He turned, finally looked at me. She loved me in the only way she knew how, but failure wasn't allowed. Weakness wasn't language we spoke. If I came home with a B, she'd make me rewrite my notes for hours. If I lost a debate match, I'd get the silent treatment for days. I didn't say anything. Some silences are invitations. Others are permission. This one was both. She didn't hit me, not in the way people think of it, but she hit with her expectations. Every conversation was about how much farther I had to go, how much better I had to be. He sat back down. By the time I graduated law school, I didn't even feel anything. No pride, no relief, just checked a box, moved to the next. He didn't look at me now, just stared at the silver flash drive between us, the one that had started this whole unraveling. "I guess that's why I didn't question Elias," he said softly. "He was the only person in my life who didn't expect me to be perfect, or so I thought." Another silence. I broke it this time. "You know what the difference is between being raised for success and being raised for survival?" I asked. He looked up. "Nothing," I said. "They both teach you to be afraid of failing. They just dress it differently." He exhaled, sharp, not angry, just knowing. "You think I'm like her?" he asked. "No," I said gently. "I think you've been trying not to become her your whole life." That one landed. And then something happened. He nodded. Not in defeat. Not even in agreement. Just acceptance. And in that moment, the silence between us finally meant something else. It wasn't full of fear. It wasn't weighted by shame. It was shared. So when I stood to leave, he didn't try to stop me. But right before I reached the door, he said something that made me pause. "You're not the only one who was sold," he said. "I just didn't realize the price until someone else tried to cash me in." I turned to face him. "You're not alone in that." Then I said it, the thing I hadn't known I needed to say until that exact second. "You weren't the only one sold. I just didn't have a receipt to prove it." Because sometimes the worst kind of betrayal isn't the one that takes your money or your name. It's the one that convinces you to never ask why. I never thought I'd be here standing behind a one-way mirror in the main boardroom of Breyer and Hallman, watching a room full of men in $1,000 suits shift in their leather chairs. I was still wearing the same dark blue maintenance uniform I always wore. Same mop bucket, same ID badge. But something had changed. This time, I wasn't invisible. This time, I had something they didn't. Truth. Mason stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Elias sat at the far end, legs crossed, smiling like a man who already knew the outcome of the meeting. If he noticed Mason didn't greet him the way he usually did, no handshake, no easy banter, he didn't show it. I'd helped set up the recording devices last night. 3 hidden mics, 1 in the flower arrangement, 1 inside the light fixture, and 1 cleverly placed, embedded in the base of Mason's own chair. I also knew which file Mason was about to play. The one we'd reviewed 22 times. The one with Elias's voice, clear as day, discussing the financial rerouting. He'll sign it without reading. Mason never checks the final pages, just move the liabilities and keep his name on it. The boardroom was full now. 12 members, some old, some newer, all loyal for now. "Thank you all for coming," Mason said, his voice even, controlled. "We're here to finalize approval on the March restructuring proposal, which you all received last Friday." Some heads nodded. Others flipped through printed packets. Elias leaned forward. "I've already prepared my statement," he said. "If there are no objections, I'd like to begin." Mason raised a hand. "There's something I need to show you first." He picked up a remote. Behind him, the screen lit up. For a second, it was blank. Then the audio started. Static. Then a voice. Elias's voice. "Move the liabilities and keep his name on it." The reaction in the room was immediate. Papers rustled, heads turned. Elias froze for half a beat. Only half, but I caught it. The screen cut to a spreadsheet. Line items with mismatched totals. Then a second voice. His assistant confirming the swap of external debts into internal holdings. Mason didn't speak. He let the room listen. The clip ended. Silence. Dense. Tense. One of the older board members cleared his throat. "Mr. Hallman, would you like to explain that?" Elias adjusted his tie. "That audio is fabricated," he said calmly. "Taken out of context or perhaps edited. I have never—" "You recognize your voice?" Mason asked. Elias blinked. "Of course I do, but that doesn't prove anything." He turned to Mason. "We've known each other for 22 years. We started this company in your garage. You're going to take the word of some tech glitch over me?" Mason didn't flinch. "This isn't about glitches," he said. "It's about what's been hidden. Repeatedly. Intentionally." He paused. "And I'm not the one who found it." Now every eye in the room turned to the glass wall. Behind it, I stood still, my heart in my throat. "You remember Angela?" Mason said. "Most of you don't, but she's worked here every night for 6 years." A few glances shifted, uncomfortable. "She found the missing USB. The real March draft, not the one Elias slipped into the packet." A younger board member raised a brow. "And how exactly would a janitor know what to look for?" "She didn't," Mason replied. "She knew what didn't belong. That was enough." Another silence. Elias leaned back, lips tight. "You're blowing up the company over hallway gossip?" "No," Mason said. "I'm saving it from the person who's been trying to sell it out from under me." Elias stood. "So that's it? You let some cleaning lady manipulate you into turning on your own partner?" Mason stepped closer, voice low, sharp. "She didn't manipulate me. She reminded me how to see. Because once a room sees the truth, no one leaves unchanged, and someone always runs first. The audio played again, same clipped phrases, same smug calculation. He'll never know. Shift the weight. He signs. We're free. Only this time, the silence after it ended wasn't stunned. It was charged. Board members weren't just uncomfortable now. They were angry, whispering, glancing at each other with that look people get when they realize they've been played. Elias's fingers tapped the table. Once, twice, then stopped. "Fabricated," he repeated, louder. "Stitched together by someone with an agenda." He stood again, this time addressing the room. "We are really entertaining this, based on the word of a janitor who's probably been stealing files out of curiosity?" His voice was full of disdain now, venom leaking from every syllable. "She's not part of this company. She doesn't belong in this room, hell. She doesn't even belong in this building unless she's holding a mop." No one laughed. Not this time. Mason remained where he was, hands resting flat on the table. "You think that matters to me?" he said quietly. Elias scoffed. "It should. She's nobody, Mason. A poor girl from the Bronx who probably got lucky rifling through the wrong desk drawer." "She didn't get lucky," Mason replied. "She got smart. She noticed what none of us did because we were too proud to see it." He stepped away from the table. "She's the reason we didn't sign that deal. She's the reason I'm standing here today." Elias turned red. "You're seriously saying what? That this girl, what's her name? Angela, she saved the company? From me?" Mason nodded. "She didn't just save the company. She saved me." The words hit like a fist on the table. Elias froze. Mason's voice, usually reserved, now carried weight measured, but unshakable. "I was ready to sign away everything, and she stopped me. Not because she had something to gain, but because she couldn't stand watching a man walk off a cliff and say nothing." He looked toward the glass, toward me, and for the first time, I felt seen, truly seen. "She saw something was wrong. She did the work. She took the risk. And she told me the truth." Elias laughed, bitter and tight. "You're letting your guilt talk, Mason. This is pathetic." But the damage was done. One of the board members, a woman named Celeste with 30 years at Breyer and Hallman, leaned forward. "We've all reviewed the March deal, and now we've heard what was meant to stay hidden." She turned to Mason. "Do you have any more recordings?" Mason nodded and signaled. Another clip played. This time Elias's assistant, discussing how to erase digital footprints, how to reroute internal funds. More whispers, this time sharper, harder. "You used my trust," Mason said, his voice quieter now, but harder than steel. "I trusted you with my company, with my family's legacy, with my name." Elias didn't respond. For once, he had nothing clever to say. Across the room, no one came to his defense. I watched it unfold from the other side of the glass, chest tight. Not because Elias was losing, but because Mason had chosen to speak, chosen to stand. And, in doing so, he'd lifted me with him. They didn't know it yet, but that boardroom was about to become the scene of more than just a resignation. It was the beginning of a reckoning, one that would echo far beyond those glass walls. When the boardroom finally cleared, and Elias was escorted out with a security team and a resignation letter that barely felt like enough, Mason turned to me. Everyone else had left. The air was still thick with everything unspoken. "I want you to stay," he said simply. I shook my head. "I don't belong here." "You do," he insisted. "After today, more than ever." I looked at the long polished table behind him. I wasn't meant to be part of that room. I was never meant to be part of this world. He stepped closer. The storm in his eyes softened. "You chose to speak when no one else did. That matters." "Until it doesn't," I whispered. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he took out a small case from his inner jacket pocket and handed it to me. The silver flash drive. The original. "I checked it again," he said. "You were right." "I wasn't trying to be right," I said, my voice low. "I was trying to be decent." He smiled at that, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Angela, I meant it. You saved me." "Then let me go now," I replied, "before your gratitude turns into suspicion." He frowned. "Why would I ever—" I took a step back. "Because he already planted it." Mason froze. I didn't have to explain who he was. Before Elias had been dragged out, he'd left one final parting shot, quiet, but sharp enough to carve a scar on any foundation. "She came out of nowhere, didn't she? Right when you were about to sign. What a convenient little miracle." A sentence, a seed, and now I could feel it growing behind Mason's eyes. He looked at me like he wanted to believe, like he was trying to fight whatever storm was forming in his own head. But even he couldn't help it. I saw it, the shift, the recalculation. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I nodded slowly. "It's okay," I said. "You don't have to say it. I've seen that look before." He stepped forward again. "No, you don't understand. I'm not thinking straight," I said, a small bitter smile. "Welcome to my world." I placed the silver USB on the table between us. It clicked softly against the wood. "You can keep that, for your records." And then I turned and walked out. I could feel his eyes on my back, could feel the weight of everything we hadn't said pressing down like a storm cloud about to burst. I didn't cry. Not yet. But the worst kind of pain is the one that hides behind silence, the one that doesn't bleed so no one thinks it hurts. I didn't blame Mason. Not really. When you've been betrayed by someone you loved like family, even the truth feels suspicious. But I didn't expect what would come next. Not the questions, not the background checks, and definitely not the file they pulled with my name on it. Mason called me 3 days later. I didn't answer. By the 4th message, it was just 4 words. "Can we talk, please?" I didn't reply right away. I'd already gone back to cleaning different building, different badge, smaller windows. A place where no one looked twice at me, and no one asked questions. A part of me found comfort in that. The rest of me, the part that had started to believe in something more, felt bruised in a way I couldn't name. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown. Neutral territory. Not his office, not mine. No marble floors, no glass walls, just 2 chairs and a chipped table by the window. He was already there when I arrived, staring into a cup he hadn't touched. When I sat down, the silence between us stretched thin. "You looking for more answers?" I asked, not cold, just tired. "No," he said. "I'm here to apologize." I didn't move. I didn't speak. "You didn't say anything," he continued. "That's why I owe you more." He looked me in the eye, and for the first time, he didn't look like the man who ran a firm. He looked like a man who had run out of excuses. "After you left," he said slowly, "I did what scared men do. I asked legal to dig into your past, background checks, history, anything that might explain why you were there at the exact moment I needed saving. I didn't blink. What did they find?" "Nothing," he said. "Nothing bad, nothing meaningful. Just enough to make me feel ashamed." I nodded. That's the thing about doubt. It doesn't need a reason. Just a spark. He swallowed. "I let him get in my head. Elias. His parting words about you showing up a little too perfectly. I couldn't unhear it." I stared at him. Not angry. Just hurt. "I thought," I said, "maybe if I did the right thing for the right reason then, just once, someone wouldn't look at me like I was a threat waiting to happen." I looked down at my hands, folded around the paper cup. "But then you looked at me exactly the way they always do, like trust is something I'm not allowed to have." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I was wrong." "You were scared," I corrected. "But so was I." He didn't speak. "I've lived most of my life trying to prove I'm not what people expect when they see my zip code or hear how I was raised. And I made peace with being invisible, Mason. But this time, I chose to step into the light." I paused. "And you turned it off." The silence was heavier than any shout. "I don't belong in a place," I said, "where people are just waiting for me to betray them. I've been fighting that narrative since I was 12. I'm not starting over again." "I get that," he said quietly. "But you don't have to leave." "I already did," I replied. "You just didn't notice until now." He looked like he wanted to fix something, but didn't know what tools would work. Some things don't need fixing. They just need to be left alone. I stood up. "Thank you for the coffee." He stood too. "Angela, You don't have to explain," I cut in. "I know what betrayal does to a person, but I also know what it means when someone helps you with nothing to gain and everything to lose." I looked at him, just for a second. "You didn't lose me because you doubted Elias. You lost me because you doubted me right after I didn't." Then I left. And this time, I didn't look back. Trust dies slowly, then all at once. But sometimes, what survives that fall is something stronger. And if it's meant to rise again, it has to earn its way back. The South Bronx wasn't on any of Mason's usual routes. It wasn't on the way to the office, or to the penthouse gym, or to any place he'd ever had reason to visit. But on that day, he went anyway. Dressed down, alone, holding nothing but a folded slip of paper with a street name scrawled in Angela's handwriting from weeks ago. It was a hot morning. City heat stuck to everything like guilt. The kind you couldn't wash off, no matter how much you paid for dry cleaning or distance. He walked past corner stores with half-lit signs, kids playing barefoot on cracked sidewalks, and faces that didn't flinch when they saw him because they'd seen suits before. They'd seen promises come and go. What they hadn't seen was a man like him, looking like he was trying to remember how to be small. Angela wasn't home. But the super, an older woman who looked like she ran the building with more heart than budget, recognized the name when he asked. "She works nights," she said. "Cleans 2 places now. Leaves early. Comes back late." Mason nodded. He didn't ask for more. He just waited. On the stoop outside her building, he sat for hours. No phone, no briefcase. Just sat. It was almost 9 p.m. When she finally came around the corner, hoodie up, backpack slung low on one shoulder, keys already in her hand. She stopped cold when she saw him. "You get lost?" she asked, not moving. "No," he said. "Just late." Angela didn't invite him in, but she didn't walk away either. She opened the door and held it. That was enough. Her apartment was small, clean, quiet. 2 second-hand lamps, a table with uneven legs, the scent of lemon cleaner still clinging to the floorboards. What caught Mason's attention wasn't the space. It was the photograph, framed in a cheap plastic edge, sitting alone on the shelf above her bed, a woman with tired eyes and a half-smile that didn't quite hide the hurt. "Your mother?" he asked gently. Angela nodded, setting her bag down. "She worked 3 jobs, never complained, never let me go hungry." She paused. "She also never trusted anyone, not even herself, some days." Mason looked at the photo again. It said everything Angela never had to. "I didn't come here to fix anything," he said after a while. "I know I can't." She didn't interrupt, didn't help him out. "But I've never gone out of my way to apologize to someone I misjudged. I've spent most of my life assuming the worst in people was just realism." He looked at her now. "But this time, I was wrong." Her arms were crossed, but her shoulders had softened. "You didn't just doubt me," she said quietly. "You doubted the version of me you hadn't even tried to know." He swallowed hard. "You were right about Elias, about the deal, about everything." Angela shook her head. "That's not the point." He waited. She looked up at him, tired, honest, unflinching. "Being right didn't change how it felt to be questioned the second I became inconvenient. I've lived with that all my life. I thought you saw past it." "I thought I did too." They sat in silence for a long beat. He walked over to the photo, not touching it, just letting it be. "She would have been proud of you," he said. Angela let out a small breath, somewhere between a scoff and a sigh. "She wouldn't have believed you." "I don't blame her," he said. Another pause, then slowly she asked, "Why are you really here?" Mason turned to face her. "Because the company's still standing," he said. "But I'm not until I make this right." Angela said nothing, but this time she didn't ask him to leave, and that, for now, was enough. Some apologies don't come with forgiveness. They come with time and proof, and sometimes the only way to rebuild trust is to keep showing up. The next time Mason came back, he didn't knock right away. He just stood in front of Angela's door for a long moment, long enough to feel the weight of what it meant to show up when no one asked him to. He didn't come with flowers, or excuses, or gifts pretending to be apologies. Just a folder, and a quiet kind of resolve. Angela opened the door before he could raise his hand to knock. She stepped aside, let him in, and sat down at the same small table by the window. She didn't ask why he was back. This time, she wanted to listen first. "I kept thinking," Mason began, "about what you said. That being right didn't make the hurt any smaller." She didn't nod, didn't give him the comfort of confirming, just watched, still, present. He placed the folder on the table between them and slid it over. She didn't open it. "It's not a contract," he said. "Not the kind you're used to." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it?" He exhaled. "It's blank." Now she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of white paper. Clean, unmarked, no headers, no legalese. Just space. "What do you want me to write?" she asked. "Anything," Mason said. "Or nothing." She stared at him. He leaned forward slightly, not to close the distance, but to be within it. "You said you've spent your life being defined by other people's fears, being priced, doubted, shuffled around. I've done some of that too, just dressed in better suits." His voice dropped. "I don't want to live like that anymore, and I don't want you to have to either." Angela let the words hang there for a while. "I don't need you to rescue me," she said. "I know. I don't want to owe you. You won't. And I won't play savior for you, Mason. I won't be the reason you suddenly feel good about yourself again." His eyes didn't flinch. "I'm not asking for that." She tapped a finger against the blank page. "Then what are you asking?" He swallowed once, then said it. "Just this. Can we try again, this time without the script written for us? No contracts, no expectations, just see what's possible when two people choose to show up, together." Angela looked back down at the paper. White space. For the first time, inviting, not threatening. She closed the folder slowly, placed it aside. "I don't trust easily," she said. "I'm not asking you to," Mason replied. "Just to trust yourself when you decide." There was a long, unbroken silence after that. But it wasn't awkward. It was respectful. Open. She stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the lights of a city that had never once waited for her to catch up. He didn't move. He didn't fill the air with empty noise. And finally, she turned to him. "You're serious about this blank page thing?" "Completely." Angela thought for a second, then gave a small smile. Just a corner of her mouth, but honest. "Then let's not sign it. Let's just see what we write without trying so hard to prove we belong." Mason nodded. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt the need to say anything more. Some beginnings don't start with vows or victories. They start with silence and the quiet promise, "I'm here. I'm staying." Let's write it differently this time. 6 months later, the office didn't look like any firm Mason had ever worked in. There were no marble floors, no steel doors, no nameplates with job titles longer than handshakes. Just soft light, wide windows, and a shelf of second-hand books no one was in a hurry to organize. People called it the quiet room, even though it wasn't silent. There was always music in the background, sometimes jazz, sometimes a single piano. Laughter echoed in the halls when someone figured out how to file paperwork without getting overwhelmed. Coffee smelled stronger here, maybe because no one was rushing to leave. This wasn't a company. It was a place, a starting point. The Foundation for Unseen Voices had no corporate tagline. It didn't need one. It existed because two people decided that survival shouldn't be the finish line. Angela never asked for her name on the letterhead. She just showed up every morning before the staff arrived and brewed the first pot of coffee. She made sure the fridge had fruit and not just cheap pastries. And she left handwritten notes for survivors who came in for help. Notes like, "You are not what happened to you," and "Being quiet was never your fault." She'd become the heartbeat of the place without ever trying to be. Mason handled the logistics, the donors, the press. But when someone asked him why he started it, he always gave the same answer. "Because someone once reminded me what it looks like when truth is spoken by someone with nothing to gain." The office had one framed photo near the entrance, a black and white shot, soft light. Angela and Mason, seated side by side on a bench, both looking away from the camera, like they hadn't realized someone was capturing the moment. That frame sat where the old silver one used to be. Angela had kept her mother's photo, of course, but she moved it to her desk, not to forget it, but to separate her pain from her purpose. Because this new place wasn't built on grief. It was built on the decision not to let grief speak for them anymore. One afternoon, a new client walked in, a girl barely 19, clutching her backpack like it was her only lifeline. Angela greeted her softly, offered water, didn't ask questions. The girl pointed to the photo on the wall and asked, "Is that you?" Angela nodded. The girl studied it. "You look calm." Angela smiled. "I wasn't that day, but I was learning." The girl sat down, not because she trusted yet, but because the silence felt safe. Later that night, Mason passed by Angela's office. She was finishing up intake forms, her handwriting still slightly uneven from years of rushed notes. He leaned against the doorframe. "You ever think we'd end up here?" he asked. Angela glanced up. No, she didn't need to say more. They both knew here wasn't about the building. It was about the choice to stay after everything tried to make them leave. "I was thinking," Mason added, "we should take down the picture." Angela looked confused. "Why?" "So we can hang more," he said. "Of others. Of moments that matter." She nodded. "As long as that one stays in the center," he smiled. "Always." There was no declaration, no dramatic end. Just two people who had once been torn apart by silence, now choosing quietly, every day, to make space for voices like theirs. And for the first time in a long time, Angela didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was living. It was raining that night. Not the dramatic kind, not movie rain. Just steady. Soft. Like the sky wasn't sad, just tired. We had just finished closing up the office. I was wiping down the counter by the kitchen, and Mason was counting the folders left on the front desk like he always did, pretending it was about accuracy when I knew it was about control. Some habits die slower than others. He looked at me differently now. Not with pity, not with admiration either. Just like I was real, and seen, and still becoming. That night, he didn't bring flowers. No ring. No speeches about love or second chances or fate. He came to me holding a worn envelope, the kind with creases that mean something's been read too many times. "I found this," he said, tucked behind one of my old books. My mother's last letter. I never opened it. I raised an eyebrow. "And?" He handed it to me. "You should read it first." I did, silently. It was short, honest, full of things I think she couldn't say when she was alive. She wrote about regret, about pressure, about the loneliness of trying to build a legacy without knowing how to love a child out loud. At the end, she wrote something that surprised me. If you ever find someone who tells you the truth even when it's ugly, stay. That's what I should have done more of. Stayed, listened, loved slower. I looked up. Mason wasn't crying, but something in him had let go. He walked to the corner of the room where we kept the coat rack, the umbrella stand, the light switch we always forgot to turn off, and picked up a small box. He placed it on the counter. It wasn't velvet. It wasn't new. Inside was a single key.
"To my place," he said. "But I'm not asking you to move in."
I stared at it.
"I'm asking if we can keep writing this thing," he continued. "One chapter at a time. No rush, no contract."
I didn't say anything right away. I didn't need to. I reached out, closed the box, slipped it into my coat pocket, then I turned off the lights. We walked out together, locking the door behind us. And outside, in the quiet street where no one was watching, I linked my arm through his. Not because I had to, not because he asked, but because I wanted to. And that was the difference.
Later, people would ask if he ever proposed. I always say yes, but not the way they mean. There was no restaurant, no kneeling, just a night, a key, a letter, and a man who finally learned how to stay. And this is where I tell you the truth. I used to think my story ended the night I ran barefoot into a church, or the night I whispered in a boardroom and made the world stop for a second. But it didn't end there. It didn't end the day I forgave Mason, or the day he forgave himself. It didn't even end when we opened the doors of the foundation. It started, really started, the moment I realized I'm not what happened to me. I'm what I chose to become after. I used to be a product, a transaction, a name on a sheet no one read twice. I was once a girl who was sold. Now I'm a woman who chooses what to keep. And I chose to stay. I chose to speak. And I chose myself, not as something to protect, but as something worth keeping.